Alright, I'm going to go ahead and show how to make mechs in Space Engineers using the Advanced Walker 2 script. And I did a stream about a week ago that showed how to do it with a four-legged walker, showing a bunch of the features. Apparently that was really quiet and it was really difficult to hear me, so hopefully it's a lot more clear. I'm going to go ahead and turn down my audio here because it's a bit loud. That's up. That's a bit better. Alright, so first of all, I'm going to go ahead and load up the script just so we can see exactly what we're working with here. So if we just go ahead and place this down and we go ahead and find the script here, so it's going to be the Advanced Walker script if I can find it here and spell it correctly. Here it is. Okay, as soon as it loads in, we are presented with this. So as you can see, this is the Advanced Walker 2 script by B Soldier. Now we're going to go through each of these lines here, from here all the way to here. And we're also going to go over this. We're going to go over what each of these do. And so that way it'll be really easy to build your mech. And then we're also going to go through how to actually build your mech. And we're going to go and make a two-legged mech in this video, just make it really short and simple. Of course, the first thing we're going to look at is this part here. It says import from custom data. And by default, when you load the script, it is set to true. I normally set this to false because here in the code I just find it easier to use and it has a little more features than the custom data. But if you prefer the custom data, well, in the custom data it has most of the features here. So you can actually see all of it here. I just prefer using it in the script because it's actually spaced apart. It's easier to tell the different sections apart. So now we're going to go down to this section here. Now it says Boolean and use forward equals true. Now in this part it's asking you if you want your mech's legs to be forward or backwards. So if your mech looks like a person and has forward facing legs, then you want this. If its legs are backwards like a chicken, well, you want to set this to false. That really depends on your mech though. And of course, if your mech is digitigrade, you have to think a bit. The knees are kind of just like forward like a person here, but then you have like an extra joint that goes down. So I'll go over exactly how that works. You're going to want that to be true for that type of mech as well. Now we come to the next part where it says thigh length. So this is determining how long the thigh of the mech is. Normally you can leave the thigh length at normal size and it'd work perfectly fine. You could do the same with the calf here, leave it as default 2.5 and 2.5. This doesn't change all that much with the mech, but let's say if your mech, you want to take longer or shorter steps, or you want to walk like a little bit differently because let's say like the thigh part of the mech is really small and the mech has like really long calves, then you might want to play with these values a bit. Essentially what this does is it's going to make that portion of the mech take longer steps or shorter steps. So in other words, if you change these values to be shorter, like let's say 1.5 or even just 0.5, what's going to happen is that it thinks that the mech's legs are really tiny. So in order to compensate for that, the mech will take longer steps, so that way it could travel a bit faster with that, and it also makes it a lot more stable. However, if you make it like 3.5, then what happens is it takes like little baby steps, which can make it a little bit more stable if you want, but that really depends on the mech that you're making and how you want it to move. Also, it helps with stability, so if you're having problems with it falling over, maybe you might want a longer or shorter step, just so that we can make things work. Now we're going to go over standing height. I don't really mess with this value a lot, but this is basically the height that your mech is standing. And I'm not sure if this affects your walking, but it might affect the way that your mech stabilizes. And of course, this part here, standing lean. Let's say you want your mech to be standing up and leaning down, or maybe you want to be looking up when it's completely not doing anything or just standing. This is where you edit that. So you can change this value here if you want it to be leaning forward or leaning backwards. By default it's standing. Now we get to the more interesting parts that are actually more important to the mech itself. Now, these are the most important values you'll be changing almost every time that you work on your mech. First is the hip offset. Now, when you use the script and build your mech is by default going to have its legs in a specific position. But let's say the center of mass of your mech is more forward or more backwards, and the way its legs currently are sitting by default, it leans forward or leans backward too much because, it's leaning. You can change the offsets here to change the legs so that way the center of mass is more centered, if that makes any sense. You can also use this to help with things like digitigrade mechs, where you have the extra knee or whatever that's making the mech stand. So this will help out with making sure that the mech is actually standing properly and make sure all your joints are aligned the way you want them to be. So the first one here is hip offset. Basically, by changing this value, positive or negative, it changes the angle at which the hip is going. So like maybe if it's 10 degrees off, you can make it lean a little more forward or maybe a little more back. It's really up to you. The same thing applies for knee offset. If you want the knee to be more forward or more back, but when it's normal standing position, you can change that. And the same applies for the foot pitch offset. So you can go ahead and change that to make sure that the feet are angled properly. And this is probably the most important one because this is actually going to make sure you're standing up, your foot angle. Now, the next one here is rotor limits. Now, by default, it's 135, but if you wanted to be more specific, you can actually change this, and this will determine the automatic rotor limits of pretty much all of your rotors on the entire mech. This also applies to your hinges. So let's say you only want like a 30-degree angle here, like 35 or something like that. Well, that means that all the limits on the rotors could be between negative 35 and positive 35. If we change it to 90 or whatever, it'll only be between negative 90 and 90. That really helps a lot if you want your mech to, not move its legs past a certain point or, not collide with everything, so you can change that. It also helps with clang because you don't have to worry about, the angles being off and you're working with a rotor and suddenly it just wants to explode because it does a full 180-degree glitch or something like that. It's weird, but when you build stuff with subgrids, that tends to happen when you're setting your rotor limits. This automatically puts your rotor limits, so that way you don't have to deal with that bug. The next thing here is also going to be extremely important, especially if your mech is of like a different size, like really big or really small. This changes a lot. This is the step speed of your mech, and this basically is saying how fast is your mech moving. If you set this number higher, like let's say it's 0.5, it's going to walk faster or take more steps. If it's 0.3, then what it's doing is it's taking less steps. You'd also put like intervals, well, not intervals, but like you can basically do like 0.35 or 355 or something like that if you want to be like more specific at the walk speed and fine tune it. But basically, this is determining how fast your mech is going to walk, and this is really important because you want to set your mech at a speed where it moves quickly, but it doesn't fall over. Because the worst part about a mech is when you fall over and you can't get back up. So you just want to avoid falling over. The step speed is probably one of the most important parts of that, but making sure you don't fall over while you're walking. You want to move slow enough so you can stay standing or stable. But that also depends on the build of your mech, because stability is pretty important. Now, the next thing here is max speed, and despite the fact that it says max speed, this isn't talking about like, oh, your mech goes at a max speed of like 10 meters per second, or 20 meters per second, or 5 meters per second. It's not talking about that. Max speed is actually the maximum speed of the rotors that it's using at the joints. So let's say it's taking steps, like really fast steps, but the legs just aren't moving fast enough to keep up with the actual step speed. This is where the max speed comes in. This changes the maximum speed that the rotors are going to be moving in order to make the walk cycle work. So if you change it to be like higher, like 3 or 4 or 5, what's going to happen is that the rotors are going to be rotating faster during the walk cycle in order to keep up with the step speed. You can also change it to be slower if you don't want your steps to be so sudden. If you want to be more slower, more majestic, however you want it. Now we get into some more interesting things. Now over here we have a torso twist input. Now this is referring to if your mech has torso twist. So if you want the bottom of your mech to be facing one way and the top of your mech to be facing a completely different direction, this is where stuff starts to get more interesting for you. So of course you can set this to false if your mech doesn't have a torso twist or anything like that. Or if like the lower part of the body and upper part of the body are all one piece, this is kind of irrelevant. But if they are two separate pieces, then this is something you do want to keep as true. Now the torso twist input is stuff like, you know, A, D, left arrow key, right arrow key, stuff like that. Just controlling the top of your mech and the bottom of your mech separately. Now here you can change the torso twist speed. So if you want to like look around faster or slower with the top of your mech, you can change that here. And this is the sensitivity. You can change this as well, so that way it's more or less sensitive. Now, display jaw direction, I'll be honest, I don't actually know what this means, but I guess it's more relevant to where the front of your mech is facing and where it displays. And I guess that's more relevant later on when we go to like the status cockpit screen or something like that. It might be relevant to that, but I'm not quite sure. I haven't messed with this setting. Now, maximum leg turn speed, this determines the bottom of your mech. So the top of your mech moving here is separate from the bottom of your mech moving. So the max leg turn speed is when you're using your arrow keys to, well, no, it's actually when you're using your A and D keys to make the bottom of your mech turn separately from the top of your mech. If you want your legs to move one way, but you want the body of your mech to stay facing the same direction. This is where you change the speed of that. Now, here's something more interesting, aim pitch. I believe this is more relevant to the aiming functionality of the script that I have not really messed with. But of course, this is basically determining if you want your mech's arms to move while you're like making your mech move up and down or something like that. I think that's what it does. Over here, max AI, or no, max aim pitch, so 5 degrees. Again, more things related to aiming, which I haven't really messed with in the script. Over here you have aim pitch sensitivity. These three are all linked together with just like the aiming. I guess that's more for like if you want the mech to be like a lot more stable when it's looking around or something like that. I think that's what it's referring to. Now we go into the more unique things here. So here we have acceleration lane. So when your mech is accelerating or basically speeding up, do you want it to lean forward or not while it's speeding up? That's what this is talking about. And this is how much it leans. I'd prefer you to keep this just a little bit so that your mech doesn't lean backwards as you're trying to move. Because, you know, your legs are moving, you have to make sure the top of the mech doesn't fall over while you're moving. It's kind of better to lean forward just a little bit. Now here's the acceleration modifier. This right here, changing this number will determine essentially how fast your mech accelerates. Like, it'll take slow steps and then take faster steps as it keeps going. You can change that here, or you can make it slower. It's really up to you if you want to change this. I keep most of these values default. Over here, this is related to the cockpit that you're using to actually control the mech. So here, cockpit name, you can change the name of this if you want it to be different. Or, you know, you could just name your cockpit or remote control to mech cockpit right here. And this will allow you to control the mech using whatever it has this name. So you can name this to whatever, and whatever has that name is what you're controlling the mech from. If you're using a remote controlled mech, your remote control is going to have this name. If you're using a seat, your seat's going to have this name. Now, if your mech is AI, you're still going to want the remote control or a seat to have this name. You always just have to have something with this name, so it's using it as a reference for controlling the mech, whether it has AI or not. This here is mech name, so if you want your mech to have a name, you can have it right here, and this becomes relevant later when we go into these panels. So mech name, you can type whatever you want here, whatever you want your mech's name to be, and it will actually display on the panel I'll talk about later. Also, this is really helpful because, you know, if you you can also put your own credits in here, like, I don't know, Drago's mech or something here. It's really up to you. Over here, reference name, remote control. This is the reference for essentially what it's going to use to reference the whether it's aligned to gravity or not. I will say aligning to gravity in the script is a little bit weird. It does it kind of well, but kind of not. But that's really up to you and how you design your mechs. Of course, by default, it's remote control. Most of my mechs don't have remote control because, like I said, it's a bit wonky and a bit weird. But if you want that feature to be enabled, you can add a remote control to your grid. The next part is the incline camera, and this actually has a very interesting feature. If you have a remote control and you have an incline camera facing down, it is going to be using that camera to detect the angle of the floor and try to align the mech to keep it upright at that angle. It's a neat feature I haven't really played with much, but it is there if you want to try messing with it and try making your mechs using that. The next thing here, status use cockpit screen true. This is saying if you want the status screen to be on your cockpit. Now, most people, you're not going to be looking at your cockpit screens. Like, let's say if we get a control seat. I don't know about you guys, but whenever, there we go. Whenever you use a cockpit, most people aren't looking down at the different screens that are here. So if you want it to display there, you can keep that as true, but I recommend you set it to false so you can put on some LCDs that are actually at eye angle so you can actually pay attention to them more. Now, with the status screen, it's going to be telling you what weapons you have available and other information that's important to your mech. It is completely optional to put this on your mech, but it is a feature that is given in the script. So of course, stats output screen number, so you can have multiple different screens and you can put the number here for which one is going to be doing what. Now here's the LCD name. You can change this to whatever you want, but by default it is the AWS stats panel. Any panel that has this name will have the stats displayed on it. The next thing here is integrity use cockpit screen. So if you want the integrity screen to be in your cockpit, set this to true. I set this to false because I kind of want the integrity screen to be somewhere else on an LCD. And essentially what the integrity does is it shows a little diagram of your mech, and it'll show it all in white. But as your mech takes damage, and let's say you lose an arm or something, that will become red. Think of it kind of like the, what's it called, those health scripts that show how damaged your ship is. But in this case, it's doing that for your mech and all its limbs, which is really neat and interesting. So you can see how much damage your mech has taken. Cool for the bigger mechs. For the smaller mechs, it's kind of obvious when your arm is missing. But you know, it's still really cool to have nonetheless. Over here, integrity output screen number. Another number, I don't really know what it does. Okay, so here's the name for the integrity panel, AWS integrity panel by default. You can change that if you want a different panel name. Now here's the integrity scale. By default it's 0.5 because of the cockpit, but if you put it on an LCD, I would change it to 1. This basically changes the size of the little like paper doll or diagram on there. And it's good to play around with this if you want the diagram to be bigger or smaller. Now over here, let me have a blue background. You can set it to false or true. It makes the background of the integrity screen blue, or if you set it to false, it'll just be black in the background. Now here, damaged red. So this is basically if you want the damaged parts to be red. And over here, damaged green, if you want the damaged parts to be green instead. And over here, if you want the damaged parts to be blue. So you can change which ones, what color you want them to become. Now over here, Boolean continuous damage alpha. This is a feature that isn't exactly done in the script, but it is a feature that you can test out. What it does is it makes it so instead of becoming like white and red if you're missing something, instead what it'll do is it's gonna slowly turn red as it gets more and more damaged. So it goes from like white to light pink to a little more red to just red when it's completely gone. So this is a feature you can try and mess around with. Now, this part is something that's interesting. It's string number, or not string, script number. This part is really important if you have more than 2 legs on your mech. So you're going to need to have one program block if you have 2 legs, but if you're making a 4-legged mech, 6-legged mech, or any mech with more than 2 legs, this part is extremely important. So you're going to want to add a script number here. It'd be like 1, 2, 5, doesn't really matter. But essentially, whichever pair of legs is assigned to whichever program block is determined by this. So let's say leg pair number 1, you put 1 here. Or if it's pair number 2, you just put number 2 here. And basically, as long as the legs are named with the proper number, they will be assigned to the program block that has this number. So that's something that's really important if you have more than 2 legs. If you have 2 legs, it's perfectly fine. You don't have to touch this at all. The next part is something interesting here. This is auto halt. Now what this means is that whenever you're moving your mech around and you don't press anything on your keyboard, it is going to stop automatically. This is what you want to have set to true at all times, but if you want your mech to start walking and then when you let go of your keyboard it keeps walking, try set it to false. It's pretty much like you press W and then when you let go of W it still thinks you're walking. So that's what you want to set to true if you want to do that. Now this next part is for if you want to like fly or have like a jump or something like thruster jump or something like that. So Boolean override thrust. What this does is that whenever you press space on your keyboard, it is going to turn your thrusters on and make you jump or fly or whatever you like. When you let go, it is going to not override your thrusters or whatever, or it's basically going to turn off your thrusters. Now what happens is that override thrust, this makes it so when you're doing that, your thrusters are going to have thrust override on them automatically, and essentially, yeah, pretty much it's this feature of thrusters. So I just get a thruster and place it over here. Just throw a battery on it. Essentially it is asking you if you want thrust override like this, or if you want that to be off like that. So set it to true if you want your thrusters to be overridden whenever you press space, or set it to false if you want them to not be overridden when you press space. Now, the next part is use thrusters. So let's say you have thrusters on your mech and you don't want them to activate when you press space. Well, set this to false. It is true by default, but if you set it to false, the script will not use any thrusters on your mech. Alright, now over here we have aim azimuth and aim elevation offsets. These are of course relating to your arms and if you want them to aim a certain way. I haven't really tested any of these here, so these aren't too relevant for this tutorial. Now this next part is one that is extremely important and you should note. It is called throttle decay default, and you want to set this to true every time unless you're using a thruster. So what this does is it's asking if you want your mech's dampeners to be on or off. Now when it's set to false, it is actually not going to have its dampeners on unless you have a thruster for reference. So essentially, if you have that to set to false and you do not have a thruster on your mech, it's kind of like you're driving a rover, or not a rover. If you're driving a ship, you press Z and you don't have dampeners on. So you're gonna keep moving until your mech. Well, actually, it's pretty much like you have dampeners off. There's nothing stopping you. It's kind of like not hitting the brakes at all. So if you set that to true and well, if you set it to true, it means that when you let go of your keyboard, it is going to automatically stop. If you have it false, well, you need a thruster for it to use as a reference for dampeners, essentially. Then we're going to go ahead and check if there's any other features here, because I'm pretty sure there are. Throttle decay default. Now, the next one is starting step. This is a feature I discovered really recently and is fantastic. If your mech has more than 2 legs, this is super important, but if your mech has 2 legs and you want to not start with like the left leg or right leg or whatever, this is something that's also kind of valuable. The starting step essentially is saying, do you want to start with the left leg or the right leg when you're walking? By default it's 0, that means like it's not doing anything. 1 means that it's always going to start with the left leg, and 2 means it's always going to start with the right leg. So that's something interesting to note. It essentially makes it so when you're making a 4-legged mech or 6-legged mech or whatever, you can mess around with that value so that way your mech's legs actually move in sync. So always the opposite legs move. Fantastic and great. Now over here, the width ratio, this is basically, I don't actually know if this affects anything, but this is determining the width ratio of your mech. If your mech is like really wide or really skinny, you can change that. It might do something. I haven't really messed with this because it doesn't really do much on my mechs. Now, crouch speed here is something that is interesting. Whenever you're controlling a mech and you hold C, your mech will crouch. Changing this value will make it so you crouch slower or faster. And if your mech is really lightweight and it crouches really fast, you can actually do a little hop with this, which could be pretty useful if you would just want to hop over like a small obstacle or something. But anyways, I think that's all the features in the script here. Now we're going on to actually building a mech. And I'm going to show you the entire process for how to build a mech using this script. Now, there are a lot of features that this script uses, so I'm actually going to go ahead and open up the guide for the script. I will put the guide in the description if you guys want to look for it, but I'll be going over how I built my mechs, and I'll go over some extra features that I'll go over the extra features that the script has that I use in my mechs or don't use. There's a lot. Just give me a moment here. Here we go. Alright, here we go. So the first thing you want to do when you build a mech, you want to have a good location for building a mech. I recommend you build your mechs in gravity in a flat area. You can either make the flat area or find one. You can be out in the middle of the desert like this, or you can have your own special private hangar for building your mechs, which should be really cool, but it's really up to you. I do not recommend building a mech in space or at the top of a mountain for kind of obvious reasons. If you're in space, well, your mech is going to float away. It's going to be really hard to know if your mech is actually working. And if you're on a hillside, well, your mech is going to have to deal with the tough terrain before you can tell if it can even walk. So it's best to start on level terrain like this. So let's go ahead and start. You want to build your mech up in the air. Basically, make sure to give yourself enough space so the legs won't hit the ground, and then you want to go ahead and figure out where to begin making your mech. I recommend starting with the cockpit or something important and big, like maybe it's like the battery or the control seat or something else, but it's really up to you. I'm going to go and start with the control seat right here. And I'm going to go ahead and place the program block right here. So we're going to load the script into this program block, and we're going to go ahead and give this some power as well, just so we can see exactly what to do. Let's give it a reactor. It doesn't really matter what kind of power source you give it. So now that we have this running, you can see it says there is no cockpit named Mech cockpit. So you want to go ahead and you want to rename the seat or whatever you're using to control it. So let's go and rename it like this. And now as you can see, it is working. It says import from custom data because we haven't edited any of the settings yet. So we're going to go ahead and edit those settings right now. If you look right here, we're going to go to this part up here where it says import from custom data, and we're going to set this to false if we want to use the scripts part here. If you want to use the custom data, well, you can leave that as true, and you can actually just go to the custom data of the program block to edit the things. And you can follow the same tutorial from here because it has pretty much almost every feature in here already. It's just not as organized. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and we are going to begin building the mech. You want to start by building the body of the mech. And it's important to note that mechs do have a weight limit based on their rotors and hinges. And basically, the more weight your mech has, the harder it is for it to be able to walk around and move. So you want to keep that in mind. I'm going to go in and just make this simple. Just give it like a little platform here, build up. I don't know, let's put some glass here. Let's say that we have this for the body of our mech, and let's go ahead, I don't know, let's get some armor panels and throw them on the side here. Just like that. We're going to keep it really simple. And then on the back, we're going to go ahead and just cover this up like this, and then we're going to go ahead and, I don't know, we'll just cover it up like this, and then we're going to leave a hole in the back right here so we can actually access our cockpit like this. Seems pretty good. And then we're going to go and build down. Doesn't really matter how you designed your mech. You generally just want the upper body or lower body to work differently. Let's see. Do we want this mech to have a lower portion? I think yes. So we can show that part of the script. So let's go ahead and build something down like this. Now, earlier I mentioned that there was a portion of the script that talks about torso movement, and we're going to go over that here. So where is it? Torso twist, right here. So I'm going to show you how that works. So essentially it is asking if your mech has a lower portion of its body, like this, down here. Where, let's say, it has something like this, and this is where the legs are going to be attached to the mech. So let's go ahead and edit that. that rotor there, we are going to name that rotor TT, and then we're going to do minus or plus. Let's do minus for now. So what happens is when we use our arrow keys, it will move around, as you can see here. Or not arrow keys, A and D. If we use our arrow keys, the top of the mech will move, but because it's locked in place, well, you can only see it moving a little bit down there. So as you can see, it works relatively well. Now we're going to go ahead and start building the legs. Now something to note, you can use a single rotor to mount your legs, but if your mech is heavier, I recommend using multiple hinges. And there's a couple tricks that can allow you to carry more weight in your mech. Let me see if I can get an example. I know I have a big chassis on the workshop. Where is it? This one. So I have this posted on the workshop, and you'll notice that for the joints, I use multiple hinges attached like this instead of a single rotor. This allows you to carry a lot more weight, essentially. The more hinges, the better. But if you want to keep your mech light, I recommend only using a few and just keep it simple. But if your mech is big and heavy and you need to carry the extra weight, you'll need to have more hinges. And it also makes it harder to kill because, of course, more hinges means you can't take out the entire joint in a single hit. Unless you give it a warhead. Alright. So we are going to go ahead and build the mech here. Let's go ahead and get a rotor, and we're going to put the rotor right here. Now, I don't have symmetry on this bottom part because we want to make sure we know which rotor is which. This rotor right here is going to be our left hip. So if we want this hip to be our left hip, we're going to do H for hip and L for left. And it's going to be a similar notation for all of the joints. In the live stream I did last week, I did actually show how this works, but I'm showing this in relevance to all of the other parts of the script and with two legs, so you can see how that works. I'm also going to show how it works with digitigrade. So we're going to go with HL, and before I do anything else, I want to make sure I know which way this is facing. So I'm going to place 2 blocks right here, just so I know. So right here, HL minus, and as you can see, it's in this direction. If I want it to be in the other direction, I do plus, like this. If it's spinning like this, all you have to do is recompile the script. And there we go, it fixed itself. I don't want the leg to be facing this way, so I'm going to go ahead and change it the other way. So we're going to change this to a minus, like so. Simple, easy. Now we're going to go into the other leg over here and do the exact same thing. So now this rotor is going to become H, then R for right, and then if we do minus, it's facing the wrong way. So we're going to change it to a plus. And we're going to recompile it because it's spinning. There we go. It is facing forward. Now we can make the hips however long we want. Let's go with, I don't know, that long seems good. Now, here's something interesting to note. If you want your mech to, if you want your mech to be just like normal legs, like humanoid legs, you're going to do your knees on this part right here. But if you want your mech to be digitigrade, we are actually going to put the hinge back here. Now I'm going to go ahead and make this mech using the normal legs first, and then we're going to make it with digitigrade afterwards, just so I can show you how that works. So we're going to go ahead and set that hinge right there to be the right knee, or not right knee, left knee. So K for knee, L for left, and then minus for this direction. If you don't want it to be that direction, you change it to a plus. There we go. It also doesn't matter whether your hinge is in this direction or this direction, because changing the plus or minus will set it right. Now let's go ahead and set up that knee right there. KR minus. So now we have the knee set up. And now we're going to go ahead and build that out a bit. Let's go like 3 blocks. You can make it longer or shorter if you want. Just keep in mind that your mech will be top heavy. So you do want to figure out a good balance that works with your mech. Now we're going to need to build the feet joints. Now this script supports 3 joints and actually recommends to use 2 to 3 of them. In the case of Digidegrade, you cannot use a fourth joint, and I know a trick to bypass that, which I'll go over later. Anyways, let's go ahead and build the foot here, like this, just to keep it simple. Now we're going to do foot, left, and then we're going to add the letter P. I don't know what the P stands for, but it's a part of the script. You can see it's facing the wrong way. We're going to change it to a plus, and you can see it's aligned. Now if you want to check if your stuff is properly aligned, hold C while you're controlling the mech, and if it crouches properly, then you've done everything right. If it doesn't crouch properly, then you need to fix some of the directions of the angles of the legs and stuff. Let's go ahead and build the other foot here, like this. This is going to be FRP plus, just like that. So as you can see, our mech is standing now, or at least it should. Now, if we press C, you can see it works fine. Now at this point, if you have all of your joints set up and named properly, you can do the walk test. And to do the walk test, all you have to do is hold W. If it walks properly, then you're pretty much almost done with the mech. The walking part is completely done. If it's not walking properly, you will probably need to edit some values. Now let's say your mech is... You don't want your mech to have legs like this. Let's say you want them to be backwards. Let's go ahead and set knees forward to false, like this. What you'll notice is that it immediately goes backwards, like that. And then, if you do the walk test, you can see it is walking with backwards legs instead. Great. So I'm going to set this back to true. And you might notice that even while I'm in the terminal here, it is still walking. The reason why is because I forgot to set throttle decay to true. So let's go ahead and fix that. Just like that. Done. So now whenever I press W, it's going to move forward, and if I let go, it should slowly stop. Like that. Okay, everything works great. And of course, we have the little torso twist portion there. So if I move left or right like this, you can see that the legs move side to side. Alright, so now the next part is that we do actually have to drop this on the ground, but there's a small problem with that we'll have to discuss in a moment. As you can see, the mech is standing but not well. And the reason why is because we forgot one of the most important parts of the game, the gyroscope. And this is really important if your mech is really heavy. You want to make sure you have enough gyroscopes for your mech. And you're going to need multiple of them. So first, you want to make sure you have some gyroscopes on override while others are not on override. Having gyroscopes on override will make sure your mech is stable and make sure it doesn't fall over, because the override gyro makes it so it doesn't want to move. But the normal gyroscope here that doesn't have override on will allow you to control the mech. And you want to have a good enough proportion of these so that your mech is stable but still controllable. And if you have enough gyros, you can actually just use your mouse or your arrow keys to just get up. Now, a good mech is a mech that can fall over and get back up, in my opinion at least. And of course, you can see here we can move around pretty well, we can look around, and we're not falling over at all. Which is great. If you're having issues with your mech standing, you can also change the... the torque of your joints to make sure they can hold a bit more. Although keep in mind, the more torque you add, the more bouncy it might get. If the legs of your mech are vibrating and becoming a little bit clangy, you might want to set your hips to have inertia tensor on, like this, and that'll keep them a lot more stable, but of course that makes them have a little bit less force. So there's that. And of course we can test walking around now. So if I go ahead and hold W, you can see it tries walking forward. It might need a little more gyro to basically make it more controllable, but as you can see, it is walking. Just bare bones version of the script, and just the basic joints. And as you can see, it is working perfectly. Now if you want to move faster or tune it, this is where the more interesting stuff comes in. I'm going to go ahead and put it back on a stick so that way we can see how to get the other functions of the script working. So let's say you want the legs to be a little more straight, or, you know, work in a different way. Let me go ahead and just grab this return port. There we go. Right. Hello. Alright, put it a little bit higher and move it forward. Actually, I'll just grab from the head here. Right there. Alright, cool. So now that we have this, I'm going to go over some more features of the script. So let's say you don't like the way it's standing and you want to change that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and edit the script again, and we're going to look for these offsets here. So let's say you want the legs to be more straight. You're going to edit the hip offset here. Let's change it to like 30 degrees, and you'll see now the hip went up this way, but we don't want to go that way. We want to go the other way. Let's add a negative here, and you can see now it's almost perfectly straight. I wouldn't recommend making it perfectly straight because it makes it a bit hard to walk, but I'd say about that much might be good if you wanted it. Now over here, let's change the knee offset, like so. Let's change it a little more. There we go. So now, right here, let's change the foot offset. You can change this as well, and you can change it so that way the mech leans one way or the other, just a little bit. Also, I'd be very careful with this and try to align your mech with the ground as best you can. Actually, I'll just set to 0 because that's probably the best angle we're going to get. So as you can see, now the mech is standing a lot more straight because we edited and trimmed or tuned that part of the script. And when you try walking, you want to make sure the walk cycle still looks smooth. Keep in mind, this will also change the speed and, of course, the stability of your mech. So that's something really important to keep in mind. Now, if you're not happy with the speed at which your mech is moving and you want to move faster or slower, we're going to go and edit that right now. So let's see here, we want to move faster. We're going to change this value to, like, let's say 0.6. So now we're going to see what change that makes. As you can see, now it is walking a lot faster. Although that's going to make it a little bit harder to be stable, as you'll see in a bit when we try testing it out. And if we change these values here, let's change them to like 0.5, like so. You'll note not much has changed, but as soon as we start walking, it starts trying to take gigantic steps, which we probably don't want because it looks really silly. Let's go ahead and change these values a bit. Okay, that looks a lot better. Let's take a look at it again. Let's see, how fast does he crouch? I want him to hop a little bit. Let's go ahead and give him a little bit of a hop, making him crouch faster. So right here, let's change this to 3.0. There we go. Pretty fast. Alright, let's see if there's anything else here that we might want to change. Okay, everything here looks good. Alright, I think that's good enough. So we're going to go ahead and make a copy of this real quick, and then I'm going to go ahead and release the mech so we can test it out now that we tuned it a bit. So as you can see, he's still standing, and now if we try walking around with him, it becomes a little bit harder to control because you can see he's walking a lot faster. Or he's trying to. And of course, because he has the torso twist, you have to control the top of the mech and the bottom of the mech at the same time, which is a bit difficult, but it is a feature. You might also want to try adding friction to your legs. Now, to add friction to your legs, you can make the legs bigger, so that way they're a bit more stable and have a little bit more of a grip on the ground because there's more block on the ground. But you can also add more grip by using wheels, and not normal wheel blocks. I'm talking about wheel suspensions. So you want to use these. And of course, I'm going to go ahead and spawn an example so you can see which settings you want to edit. So, if your mech is using wheels for grip, there's a couple things you're going to need. Where is it? First of all, steering angle is irrelevant. You want the power is irrelevant. The strength is pretty important. You can set the strength to whatever you'd like to make sure that the mech, of course, is gripping the ground. Hip height offset you want to be as low as possible, so that way the mech is hitting the ground with the wheels and not with the actual foot itself. And then, let's see here, friction 100%. So that way you can grab the ground, or however much percent you want. Speed limits are irrelevant, it doesn't really matter. And if you don't want the wheels to move at all, you can use a remote control or a seat, and you can attach to the subgrid and press P to park the wheels. So that way they will not move at all. That's something that's important to do. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and deal with the digitigrade problem. Let's say you wanted your legs to be digitigrade instead of, you know, like this. So I'll show you how to do that. You want to use 3 joints instead of the 4 that digitigrade has. So we're going to go ahead and do this right here. And I should probably name that joint there. KL minus. And you want the joints to be angled upwards like that. Temporarily at least. So we're going to go ahead and do that for the other foot as well. KR minus. Okay, now there's 2 approaches you can do from here. Either you can add a hinge here and make the entire lower portion of the foot, aka this part right here, you can leave it like that. Or you can take a different approach and you can instead add the hinge right here. It's up to you which approach you want to use, but essentially you only want to have 3 joints for your leg, and one of them is going to be a false joint. That's the only way to actually make the mech move, well, properly at least. So we're going to go ahead and go with this approach here, and we're going to go ahead and name these properly, so plus. And let's go ahead and do the same thing with the other side. Just like that. And once you have your mech built, you want to fine tune it, especially with this kind of leg configuration. You do want to fine tune it up a bit. So let's go ahead and angle this part of the legs here. So we want the offset to be a lot more, like that. And of course, maybe a bit more actually. Let's go with 70. It's really up to you how you want it to work. But now we have something that looks like this. Let's go ahead and clean the mess that we've made down here. And let's go ahead and release the mech. So now we have digitigrade legs. If we try walking with these, they work. Not well, but they work. You do want to add more grip or just make larger leg bases or make it walk slower so you don't do the backwards shuffle. And of course, something to note is that this mech does support forward and backwards movement, so if you want to walk backwards, you just hold S. Pretty simple. Now we're going to go over some more features that are pretty important if you want to make full use of the script. So for this, I'm actually going to remove the glass on this mech here. And now we want to look at the extra features. So let's say, I don't know, let's say that our mech has like a big arm right here. Let's go and just give it an arm. Right there. He has an arm, and he has, I don't know, a rocket launcher is far too overpowered for a mech because subgrids have no health. But I don't know, let's give him a rocket launcher just because. So we're going to place a single text panel, probably on the side here, and we're going to name that text panel AWS Integrity Panel. Just like this. Now if we go into the script, we do want to change some things here. we're going to look for this one here, status use cockpit screen. We're going to set that to false. Now, this right here should change. Hold on. You set that to false, right? Yep, false. AWS stats panel, sorry. Integrity panel is for later. This one's supposed to be called AWS stats panel. Like this. Now if I recompile the script, it should change. So now you'll notice is that it has changed. If we go ahead and read what it says throttle decay on group weapons with -WGA to display them here. Well, luckily for us, we have a rocket launcher. So we're going to go ahead and grab this, and we're going to put in a group called -WGA. Save. And you'll see it says rocket launcher right there. And it says group weapon subgrid. So if you have a subgrid weapons, it'll actually tell you which ones are on the subgrid and which ones are on your main grid. So that's something pretty good. It also tells you where they are. Group weapon torso. So the rocket launcher is technically attached to the torso because it's on the same grid. But if it's on a subgrid, well, it thinks it's actually on an arm. So let's go ahead and build it some arms. So I don't know, let's give it a rotor right here, and then we're gonna go ahead and put the rocket launcher on the rotor, like this. Actually, let's make the arm a little more unique. Let's go ahead and do this, and then let's go ahead and give it a hinge so it has the full range of motion, just like this. So you can see you got up and down and it has side to side, so now it has that arm. So now, if we grab the rocket launcher and do -WGA, it is there, and you can see it now shows under, where is it? Group weapon subgrid. It's right underneath there. Now this is where things become a little bit more interesting. So let's go and place another text panel. This time we are going to go ahead and name this text panel AWS Integrity Panel. Like this. Let's go ahead and edit our program block here, and let's go ahead and set, where is it? This one, integrity use cockpit screen. We're going to set this to false. And we're going to set the integrity scale to 1 so it shows full screen in that LCD. So now what should happen is that we get a little doll right there. So you can see, it shows a little thing of our mech. The body of our mech, the head of our mech. We don't actually have a head, but it'll show it anyways. You can see, we can see the parts of our mech. Because we already named the joints of our legs, we can tell exactly which part of our mech is what. So I'm going to make a copy of this just so you can see it in action. Let's say for some reason you lost your knee, like this. Well, if you're inside the mech, you can actually see that it's gone. You can't see it anymore. So, yeah, rest in peace, the mech. And of course, if you have more hinges for your leg joints, it'll actually turn more red. But of course, that depends on the settings you've set in the program block. Now, what we're going to do is we're actually going to add our arm to that. So, there's actually a way of doing this. So, first you want to find the hinges and rotors that make up your arm, and it's probably a good idea to name them so you know which ones are what. So you're gonna, in this case the rotor is our shoulder. We're going to name this dash, if it is left, we're going to call it L, then U for upper, and A for arm. So left upper arm, save. And when we recompile the script, you'll see it shows up right there. Now we want our other lower arm to show here. We're going to name, well, this is our left shoulder, so we're going to name that left shoulder. And where's the hinge? Here we go, this is our left elbow. Doesn't really matter what you name it, just so you know where it is. We're going to name our left elbow dash left lower arm, so dash LLA, save. Recompile, and now you can see right there we have our upper arm and our lower arm shown right there. And of course, if we want to go even further, let's go ahead and grab dash left lower arm, and we're going to add the rocket launcher to that as well. So now as you can see there, it shows. So now we're going to go ahead and go here, edit, and let's see here. Let's try out the continuous damage alpha. True. And of course, one more thing we should do. Let's go and name our mech. Just so we can see what that does. Where is it? Mech name. I don't know. Walker. So our name will show there. Pretty neat if you want to have something that shows that it is your mech, so you can personalize it. Now, if you want your arm to actually aim, well, you can use Mart or the turret controller script, or just turret controller by itself if you want to control the arms. You can also just have the arms be turrets using the turret controller, which is what I do most of the time. It works relatively well. And then doing that, you can just name the arms whatever you want. So, you know, turret controller. Where is it? Left shoulder, left elbow, then the rocket launcher. So now all of that is a turret. Or you can add a script to make it work for you. So we're going to go and just add that temporarily right here. We're going to use the turret controller enhancement script here. And we're going to go ahead and we are going to grab the turret controller, the elbow, the rocket launcher, and the shoulder. We're going to name this azimuth. We're going to name this elevation. Then we're going to go ahead and recompile the program block. And pretty much our left arm here is now a turret. And of course, using the TCS script, you can also have rest angles on this, so the arm goes back to a default position whenever you want it to. Now, is there any other features I need to go over for this? Pretty sure there are plenty. Let's see here. Yeah, there's a couple other things you can actually do with the with this here. It not only shows your arms, but let's say you have like other things. Like let's say you have like a shoulder cannon, or maybe it's like lower body or something. Well, there's actually a way of doing that. So let's see here. Let's say you have, I don't know, shoulder cannon up here. We're gonna go and put a rotor here, and I don't know, put a Gatling gun up here or something. We're going to go ahead and grab that, and we're going to go give it a name. So let's see here, rotor and Gatling gun, and we're going to go ahead and name this -LTF, save. And now if you look here, it shows right there. So it's a left torso weapon there. And you can also do it for the other side. And if you have like a more of a central one, you can name it -CTF. So let's go ahead and try that. Let's see. Delete, and we're gonna call it -CTF. Save. So you can see it's showing it as like a central subgrid. Now let's see here. Alright, so I already showed how to do AI in my previous mech video with Mechs. I'm just going to go over the different commands you can run this if you want this to run remotely with timers or with scripts or even with AI blocks. So there's a couple different things you can actually do. So in the argument section here, you can type crouch like this. It's all lowercase. And if you run that command, it will automatically crouch. If you run that command again, it will uncrouch. So let's go ahead and try that again. Run, it uncrouches. Pretty simple. Now if we go into our program block again, now let's try the command walk. If we type this, it will begin walking automatically without any input at all. Now I'm gonna make it stop walking here. Now if you want to stop walking, then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to run the command halt, like this. And by running this command, it will stop walking. You can also do a command called sync to force the script to a certain step. This is directly from the guide. So if you have 4 legs, you can essentially sync their, you can use the command sync to essentially make them line up their steps as they're moving. Let's see here. We're going to go ahead and copy and paste this here, and I'm going to show you how the flight controls on this work. So let's say you want this to fly and do stuff. So I'm just going to add a thruster here, and add another thruster here. And by default, the script has it set up here to override thrusters and use thrusters. So essentially, whenever I press space, it is going to use thrusters at 100%. Probably not the best thing, but you know, it works and it tries doing what it does. So you can see, if I have enough power, it will use the atmospheric thrusters I have at full power, and it will use all thrusters, no matter what direction they are, at full thrust. Let's say you don't want that to happen. Well, what you can do is let's say you don't want the thrusters to be used by the script at all. What you're going to do is you are going to go ahead and go to the program block. You are going to edit it, and you are going to find override thrust right here. Or not override, use thrusters. You're going to set that to false, like this. So now, whenever you press space, it will not use the thrusters at all. So you can hear I am pressing the space bar. It is not flying at all. So that's something that's neat to know. Another thing you can do is that you can set it to, where is it? Set use thrusters to true, and then set override thrust to false. Like this. And essentially what this will do is it will make it so, well, it'll make it so whenever you're using the thrusters here, it does not override them all to full, essentially. So as you can see here, we can press space, and it will use the thrusters, but it doesn't use them at full. Instead, it uses them only to the amount that we're actually using them. Alright, let's go ahead and try getting back up, which will be a bit difficult, considering we did add a lot more weight to this. Alright, let's go and just paste this back up. So as you can see, we are flying up holding space, but essentially it is not using all of our thrusters to max override. Our forward thrusters are not moving at all. But if we had the override thruster set to true, it would be setting all of them to max. As you can see here, I'm only pressing space and it's only going up with those. It is actually going to be a little bit difficult to control the mech if you have subgrid thrusters incorporated on this. So what I recommend is that you actually use this in conjunction with something like the, where is it? You want to use this in conjunction with a script like the subgrid thruster script, which I'm going to get right now. Subgrid thruster manager. And this will essentially make it so that way whenever you are flying with your mech, well, it's going to use the correct thrusters. So let's say you have your up thrusters down here. Let's go ahead and just add them down here. Then you had your forward thrusters right here. Let's go just add some side thrusters too, just because we can. I'm probably going to need a lot more power for this to work. So I'm going to add even more of these atmospheric thrusters. And of course, you're probably going to need some brakes. It's really up to you how you design your mech. You can go ahead and use the conveyor function of your joints to do it all hydrogen if you wanted to. So now that we have this, I'm definitely going to need more power. So now as we're moving around, we can use the script to essentially control which way we're going with the thrusters. And of course, you might want to lock your torso while doing this as well, because your A and D keys are actually controlling which way your mech is moving. We're getting a little bit shaky there. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and check if there's any other things I have forgotten about, because there are a lot of different features to this script. Let's see here. Actually, let me go over the camera functions of the script, because this is something interesting that a lot of people will like. So, let's say you want your mech to... Well, you want your mech to stand on a platform, but the platform's at an angle, and you don't want your mech to be angled with the platform. You want it to stand up straight. So there's a couple things you have to do in order to achieve that. So as you can see right here, if we spawn our mech on this platform, it's going to stay in that position there because it doesn't really have much of a reference to try to stay upright, except for the seat. It doesn't really know which way is up or down. So we're going to go ahead and fix that. Let's go ahead and add a remote control to this mech. And keep in mind, the remote control is what the mech is using as its reference. So let's go ahead and check it here. Here it is, reference name, remote control. Now we need to add an incline camera. So now that we have the remote control, you notice the mech starts to wobble a bit more because it's using the remote control to say, hey, I'm supposed to be completely upright and at like a specific angle or something, so I want to make sure I'm always facing that angle. We're going to go ahead and place a camera at the bottom facing towards the ground, and we're going to go ahead and name this camera incline camera. So let's go ahead and do that. Just like that. So now that we have the incline camera, and if we recompile here, the camera is now scanning the terrain, and it has balancing active. So it's going to try balancing itself while using that camera. So now if we grab this and put it on that slope, it should hopefully try to stay upright. As you can see there, it has angled the legs, so that way it's trying to stay upright with the angle there. Which is pretty neat. So if you're dealing with terrain and you don't want the legs of your mech to be in like a, I don't know, constantly trying to make your mech lean, this is actually an excellent way of dealing with the terrain here. As you can see, the mech is completely upright and not really having much of an issue with this slope. And of course, I can deal with more difficult slopes thanks to the incline camera. But I will say balancing with the script is a bit weird. It does help a little bit, but it's not the best. Alright, so let's go over some other features of the script here. Let's see here. Alright, so there is an anti-roll assist that this script has. So in order to make sure that the mech doesn't fall over to the sides, if you have the space that is, you can add this feature that makes it so the mech doesn't fall over as easily. So we're going to probably add the feature down here somewhere. So what we want to do is the anti-roll assist. To counter falling over to the side, you can now add this. It will activate when the mech is tilted more than 5 degrees. What we want to do is we want to place a gyroscope either forward or backwards, and you want to tag it with RA. So we're going to go and find that rotor. It's that rotor down there. We're going to tag it with RA. And then we want it to be plus or minus based on whatever direction it might lean. So let's try plus for now. Actually, it might be better to actually... I think it's fine. like this. It says tag it. So we're just gonna try this out. RA plus. Let's see here. Okay, so that's for that. We need to put a gyroscope on this rotor as well, so we're going to go ahead and find that gyroscope. We're going to call the gyroscope RA. So now that we have that, you can see it is off. Now let's say that our mech is leaning sideways for whatever reason. Let's go ahead and try leaning sideways. Alright, that didn't do anything. Enable inertia tensors on the rotor, RA. Oh, it's because the rotor isn't named. Rotor RA plus. So as you can see, now it's set as plus, or you can set it to minus. And it'll go whatever direction it needs to. And it says to put an initial tensor on this. So we're going to go and test this out to see what happens. So as you can see, our mech is here, it looks fine. But as soon as we start leaning, will the anti-roll assist help out? Alright, it probably needs to go the other way. So let's go find RA, and we're going to change this to minus. And we're going to delete this group because this group doesn't actually do anything. So you need the rotors on that named RA, and then the actual, the gyro named RA, and then the rotors named RA in whatever direction you want to spin that. So you can see it's rotating that way, and if we try to fall over again, it should try to help us not fall over, which could be pretty helpful. Yep, it is definitely working. So if you have problems with your mech falling side to side, this feature actually makes it just a little bit harder for your mech to tip over. Alright, let's see, aiming. Alright, these are features I haven't really tested out fully in the script, as I usually like to use other methods to make them work, but let's go ahead and try figuring out how to make the left arm work here. So I'm going to go and remove this, and I'm going to go ahead and respawn this upright, and make it daytime so we can actually see what exactly we're doing. Alright, so what we want to do, we need to figure out which joint is aiming left and right. So it would be this hinge here, the elevation hinge. I'm actually going to go ahead and remove the TCS script from this right here. And we're going to remove the turret controller just so we can see exactly what happens. So we're going to find elevation, which would be this one. We're using the aim sideways. We're going to go ahead and name this TTM plus or minus. So let's see, plus or minus. And then we need to tag another joint that we want to sync with it, 2. So I'm guessing is that if you want to aim a certain way, you actually have to edit these. Let's go ahead and change the azimuth as well. So let's see. Aiming up and down is going to be ME plus or minus. So let's set it to ME plus. Okay, so according to this, it says when set up right, the arms should move by your mouse and the torso should follow to meet up with them within arc limits. Let's see. So I'm guessing it needs to sync with something else here. So let's go ahead and try building the other arm real quick. Just so we can have 2 arms on this. So let's go ahead and add it in. Let's see. This is going to be... Okay, so it's trying to do something there. I guess it needs the other one, so let's go and find that. I'm guessing we need to recompile it so it stops spinning. There we go. Okay, so the right arm is facing the wrong way. Let's find it. ME2 minus. There we go. Oh, there we go. Perfect. So as you can see here, what it's essentially doing is that it's making it so as you move your mech around, the arms will actually move around with your mech, like this. So you can actually aim a little bit better. Let's go and just add our block weapons here. It makes it a bit easier. Now the other issue is how to make it aim up and down. Let's see. ME plus or minus. Not really sure what that arm is doing, but the other arm is trying. I mean, it definitely does work, at least in this direction, so that's probably a feature that isn't fully integrated, but it does have that as an interesting feature. I'll go ahead and go through to see if there's anything else I missed. Alright, so there is something interesting. Let's say that your torso twist isn't moving the way that you want it to. So there's actually a way to fix that. So let's say the torso twist isn't working for you and you need help making sure that your mech is able to turn properly. So what you can actually do is you can add a rotor somewhere. And then what you want to do is you want to place a rotor with a gyroscope. And you're going to need to tag these. Alright. So what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to... Where is it? Find those rotors, this rotor here, and we're going to name this rotor GA, and then it'll be a plus or a minus. So let's try plus. Now we're going to look for that gyroscope and we're going to go ahead and give it an override here. So now what will happen is that whenever we turn left or right, you'll see that that rotor there is actually moving. It rotates that in order to help move your mech around without having to rely solely on your torso twist rotor. It also makes it so it's easier to turn your mech. So let's say we get our torso twist rotor and we lock it. Sorry, rotor lock. Now whenever we're turning, it makes it so the mech turns a bit easier. Let's actually go and switch the direction on this because it's facing the wrong way. Here we go. At least, hold on. Gyroscope needs to be an override, right? Or it tries to help out. I guess that's about it for this tutorial, as I've basically done everything that needs to be explained with making mechs. I'll go ahead and get a example mech from an ongoing project I've been working on. Let me go find it. Titan. Here it is. Just so you can see how smoothly you can make these. This is a digitigrade mech, and I am using a 45-degree angle here for the legs, just to make it a little bit smoother. And of course, it is making use of a lot of the features that you've already seen. So we're going to go ahead and try walking here just by holding W. If you go through the process and make sure your mech has enough gyro and stability, you can walk perfectly fine without any need for, constantly managing your Q and E keys and trying to make sure you're not falling over. And of course, it becomes really simple and easy to control. You can even just go in first person or camera view, and it'll work perfectly fine. Alright, I guess that's about it for this tutorial. I've basically shown everything that I know with the script. If you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments, and I'll make sure to answer them or make a follow-up video that goes over those issues. Alright, take care.